Welcome, everyone, to the Feeling Lighter podcast by WeShape. This is a new time for us here at WeShape. We have decided to, obviously, we're still deeply connected with WeShape, but we wanted to change the name of the podcast to the Feeling Lighter podcast. We'll get into why we're doing that later, but another big change that's happening is we have a new co-host, and I literally could not be more excited about bringing you in. So, Dr. Lisa Folden, welcome to the WeShape Feeling Lighter podcast.
Welcome. You. I'm very excited to be here.
So, you and I are going to be the primary hosts moving forward. Mm-hmm. Coach Tyler is going to be joining us on occasion. He's here with us today.
Hi again.
But I think I'm going to start by just talking about this idea and the play on the name change. And then I think our listeners would love to know more about you. I know you're deeply involved in our community and behind the scenes of the product here at WeShape, but for people who are podcast listeners, it'd be great for them to get to know you a little bit better. So
can I just make an observation too?
Please.
Like, I feel like, we did this podcast for the first year, and it was recently that we all sat down and said, like, what are we really trying to do with this? Because it's one thing just to interview people who are interesting and stuff like that, but it's another thing to come to that podcast with a greater intention. I think that's where the root of this change happened, was how do we show up and not just talk about interesting things in health and mindset and stuff like that, but how do we actually come and help people move closer to themselves by a shift in mentality? So I just wanted to tee that up so that people understood kind of where that change came from.
Yeah, and then we said, well, let's call it something different so that people can really understand more of that intentionality. So we did a lot of back and forth and came up with the Feeling Lighter podcast, sort of a play on weight loss, right? Like, everyone thinks that they'll be happy once they get that smaller body, and we have found time and time again with thousands of clients that's not really what happens. And so the mentality shift and how we connect with our body in a more meaningful way is what actually creates a lighter feeling. And so we came up with the Feeling Lighter podcast. I'm excited about the name shift.
But what's the tagline? What's the tagline? Remember?
Oh, you ready for my
you gotta
tagline?
have the tagline.
How you feel about yourself changes everything.
Yes.
That's where our behaviors come from.
That's good.
That's where our beliefs come from. That's where the root and foundation of relationship with other come from.
Yep.
So it's like a root thing. I'm always like the kind of person who wants to understand how do we get to the super, 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 super root of it all?
Yeah.
Because I know that when we make changes there, it impacts all the other things.
Yes.
So when I was pulling at those roots, that's what came out, is like literally how you feel about yourself is how you show up in the world, how you connect with others, how you... it's linked to everything.
Right.
So evaluating those beliefs and having experts on that talk about deepening that relationship with self, I felt was like a really important way that we could spend our time and bring more intentionality.
And I think it's very different than what diet culture does. It's like we focus on the outer, like what the body looks like and how we can make changes there versus really getting to the mentality and the root behind why we want to be different, what it is we're seeking with these body changes, like what we want from life. And so I think, we're going in a great direction here. So I'm excited to be a part of it.
It's like you said, right? Like, people think that achieving that body standard is going to make them feel happy, and they don't realize they'll get there and they'll still be dissatisfied. And I think a huge part of what I think the intention here is give people like awareness and permission to recognize that that's the case, and to drop into themselves and say, I can change the way I feel about myself without having to change the way I look or having to change a ton of circumstances in my life. I can just change it from within. And I think that's really the message I'm hearing a lot. Now, that was a great tagline, but I meant the other tagline, by the way. You know what I'm talking about?
No, what are you talking about?
Oh,
What you say in the beginning.
what you think, Dr. Lisa? You want to do it?
Oh, how we're shedding beliefs one episode at a time.
There we go. That's the one.
I'm full of taglines. What other
Shedding
taglines
beliefs
you want?
one episode at a time. I love it.
Yes.
It's actually shedding old beliefs that no longer serve us one episode at
And
a time.
that's how you
we
change
go.
the way that you feel about yourself.
Yeah.
Right? You examine
Absolutely.
the beliefs that you have that are keeping you stuck, that are keeping you in that state of dissatisfaction, and you shed them one episode at a time with us.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Shameless plug.
And Lisa and I were talking about this earlier, and I think, to just share that people have the belief, we'll just go right into it, that if they have a smaller body, they will feel valued, they will feel worthy, they will feel lovable.
Yeah.
And what we are here to say is, like, we want to bring people in and have conversations around how you can have all of that
All of
without
that.
a smaller body.
Yep.
Without the weight loss. So
Can we just highlight the other side of it, which is if people are valuing you for that, then like,
Yeah.
are those the people you really want in your life? If the people
Probably
around you
not.
are like, the only way I'm going to value you is if you fit this standard that I have in my head.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
It's
you
not.
want acceptance.
But some
right?
of it is the narratives we create in our own minds. You
Yeah.
know, most of us,
Fact.
I mean, there are definitely people in our lives who should be dismissed, right? Because
Yeah.
they're around us for the wrong reasons. But most of the solid relationships we have with people, they don't care at all what size our bodies are.
They really
They
don't.
don't care one bit, but we sort of project our insecurities and we assume that people feel the way we feel about ourselves, about
Yeah.
us. And they really don't. I tell my clients all the time, when you die, your loved one is not going to put on your headstone, she stayed thin, she had a small waist. Because those aren't the things that people who love you actually care about. So it doesn't really matter. But
doesn't really matter.
we you know, this world is so inundated with these messages from other places that we start to internalize them, and then we assume that other people see us in that light.
Yeah.
And they don't. Hopefully, most of them don't.
Yeah. I think that's a great segue into, you know, talking about the work with your clients, like just sharing with our listeners a little bit about who you are and the work that you do. And yeah, let's go.
Hold on. By the way, I just want to say one thing really quick. Like, we interviewed Dr. Lisa Folden on this podcast. And we all got done with that episode and was like, we love her. She's amazing. She is a doctor of physical therapy. She deeply understands the topics that we're talking about related to mentality. And when she agreed to start becoming more a part of WeShape, producing content both on the movement side and now joining us on the podcast to produce content on the mentality side, I was just like absolutely floored. I just want to say it for everybody here. I'm so happy to have you as a part of the WeShape team.
Thank you.
You absolutely represent everything that we're trying to talk about, and it's a joy to have you on.
Absolute
you.
joy to have you here.
I literally love being here. So this is perfect. And I'm honored, honestly, because I've been doing this work for a while. And sometimes when you're in this space, especially when you sort of pull away from mainstream diet and fitness culture, it feels lonely. So when you start to connect with people that get it and that you align with, it feels like home, like, oh, this is so, you can take a deep breath. So I am super appreciative of being here with you all and being a part of this WeShape family and this Feeling Lighter podcast. So background, I am a doctor of physical therapy, as Tyler mentioned, and my work, I've been doing this work for, 16 years now. Wow. And I was a traditionally trained physical therapist, so I just saw people for standard injuries, orthopedic, some neurological things, so knee pain, back pain, numbness and tingling in my hands, things of that nature. And my training was very traditional in that for me, weight loss was always on the table. It's like, oh, your knee is hurting. Well, perhaps if you lose some weight, it'll help. And I went through my own personal journey that I'm sure we'll talk about that transitioned the way that I saw fitness, health, weight, all of those things. And as a result of changing my personal belief system, talking about those beliefs, I changed the way that I practiced and interacted with clients. And so now I'm very proud to say that I have a weight-inclusive private practice in Charlotte, North Carolina, where I work with people in diverse bodies, so from the smallest version of yourself to the largest version of yourself. And I also work with people who are in recovery from eating disorders. So I get to provide a service that really no one in my area provides, and I get to have a safe, trauma-informed, eating disorder-informed, private, welcoming space for people to come and heal and recover in. And it's like an honor. Like, I love doing it. When I talk about it, I get all excited, and people are like, oh, thank you. And I'm like, it's my pleasure, literally my pleasure.
That's when you know you're doing the right thing.
Yeah, it feels so good to create a space that doesn't exist for people that deserve it, people who are marginalized. We talk about weight stigma and fat phobia. We see people in larger bodies and making assumptions about them and not creating a space for them and assuming like, you're bad, something's wrong with you, you don't have the right behaviors. So I love to fight that narrative and create a space that's welcoming. So when you come in my space, there are chairs you can fit in. You're going to feel comfortable. I'm not going to blame your weight for your condition or your pain, and you're going to be listened to and believed. That's really important in the medical setting.
Listen to and believe. That's powerful.
Yeah, so I'm really proud of what I get to do on the clinical side as a physical therapist, and I also offer health coaching to people and movement coaching for people who want to get back into movement, but it's all been muddled with diet culture and they don't know what to do. It's like, what do I do? Where do I start? And so I work with people one-on-one in small groups, and then I refer a lot of people to the WeShape platform because it's such an anti-diet and weight-neutral space for movement that's so important when you're trying to let go of diet culture. So
I love that. I love that you're putting those two things together, because I feel like people, they talk about motivation so much, and they relate motivation to, like, I don't feel motivated to do this, but they're coming at it from a place of, I want to change the way I look. I want to lose weight. It's all this negative emotions, right? And nobody's going to stick to something that is rooted in negative feelings.
Nope.
And so you're saying to them, hey, like, first of all, I'm going to hear you.
Yeah.
I'm going to believe you. I'm going to show you some appreciation. I'm going to show you some connection. And that gives themselves a permission to say, oh, like, I can show myself some connection, right? And I can show up for these workouts or movements or whatever from that place of self-care, that desire to have a body that feels good, rather than from that place of, I got to lose weight and I got to do this, and disconnect from yourself.
Yeah, for sure.
That's beautiful. Thank you for doing that in this world.
Thank you. Yeah, I again, it's my pleasure. I enjoy it. And I like the idea of, like, the shame. I tell people all the time, you don't get anything good from shame.
No.
It's really just an emotion that makes you feel really bad about yourself. Like, so nothing beautiful grows from it. And so sometimes clients will come in and, maybe I've given them a home exercise program to work on for their injury, and they'll be like, oh, I didn't do anything this week, or oh, I didn't do it that much, and their head's down. And I'm like, hey, we don't do that here. It's fine.
Yeah.
So what did you get done? Oh, I only did it twice. Oh, okay, let's reframe that. You did your home exercise program twice. That's awesome. That's great. Let's see how we can build from there. Yeah. This coming into these environments and feeling shame and then receiving that from your, health and wellness professional, like, you don't look forward to that. So then the next visit is like, oh, God, I forgot again, or I didn't do this, or I was so busy.
Or they cancel their appointment.
That is really what you see in a lot of these scenarios. They just can't, they feel bad about themselves. They're not living up to the expectation, so they stop coming. And I don't want that for people. So I'm going to do everything in my power to provide a welcoming and safe and self-compassion is the key to, like, you feeling better about what you're doing and what you're not able to do, and being comfortable saying, like, you know what, I tried, and next week I'll try again. And that's it. There's no shame to that. You're showing up, you're doing what you can in that moment, and I'm going to accept and receive that and be grateful for it.
And I think that's what I wanted to say there was, like, I just heard you say self-compassion, right, is how you show up for that. But people need to be shown compassion.
You're right. Yep.
Right? And so the moment you show them that compassion, they're like, wait, there's, like, a different feeling that can lead this journey instead of it being self-hatred, ultimately, and that's such a big deal. We need to offer a lot more people compassion so they can show up for themselves from a different place.
Right, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I really admire the work that you do, Lisa. I think it really gives people such an incredible gift to be cared for and nurtured in a space that traditionally has intention for helping, but sometimes goes astray.
Right.
So thank you so much for that work that you do.
Absolutely.
And the other thing that is such a gift here at WeShape is you have such in-depth understanding, and you're so immersed in the world of education around diet culture, toxic exercise culture. Yeah. So maybe share with us a little bit about your personal journey around what brought you into that space too, right?
Yeah. Great question. So I grew up, a lot of people don't know this about me, but I grew up with a father who was a competitive bodybuilder, fitness competitor. And it was funny because that was my introduction to health and fitness, being at the Powerhouse Gym with him, watching him work out and all the other people in there working out. He trained like one of the 4-time Miss Olympia. So this is what I saw. And I was intrigued by it. I have great respect for people who live in that world because it's really hard work to do what they do. But because of what I saw growing up, I think that my understanding of what it meant, what it was to be healthy or fit, was very much misconstrued because what they're doing is not necessarily improving their health. They are changing the aesthetic of their bodies and competing, which is fine if that's what you want to do, right? Body autonomy. But it's not necessarily healthy. I watched my dad undereat a lot. I watched him eat baby food most of the time. Like when he was in competition season, he worked out hours a day, like hours on hours on hours in order to make his body look chiseled. I'll show you guys a picture. Like, and it was great for what he was doing. But that is not what health and fitness is about. But because that was sort of my springboard, I entered my ideas around health, fitness, and movement stemmed from that. And so I was very much immersed in diet culture. I was a fitness instructor. I was the person that would, people saw me coming like, oh, hide the candy bars. Lisa's going to tell you to get a salad. I just had that reputation. And I thought it was good. I kind of liked it for a while. And I went through my own personal journey after having children where my body changed drastically. And I thought that I had like a hang on things, and I had created a weight loss program and included meal planning and nutrition stuff I had no education in. But I wanted to help people lose weight because I saw that as the way to be healthier.
I don't know anything about it, this journey.
No, right? It's all foreign to you. But it was challenging. I went really hard and basically engaged in some disordered behaviors. I think I spent 6 months of exercising every single day, no days off. That was my rule.
I remember you said that. That's insane. With little kids, right?
With little
and all
kids.
this stuff.
When I say little kids, I'm talking about a 2-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 6-year-old.
Yeah.
And I was running a business, and I was still working at other places. So I'm doing all this, and I'm
And everybody was probably like, "Oh, you're Superwoman, you're super," and you were like, "I'm Superwoman."
Yeah, dying inside.
Yeah, exactly.
So I was working out every day, and then I was eating all of my food out of small portioned containers, and I started losing weight. I lost about 20 pounds, and I got all the praise. Everybody was like, "Oh." 3 babies where? And that was a part of my identity. I wanted to be this fitness girl where you'd look at her and be like, she doesn't look like she's got 3 kids. That was like a badge of honor for me. Now I know that feels very disordered to say now, But that was my thing. And so I lost the weight, and then I was like, okay, I'm tired. My eyes were sunken in. I'm like, this is a lot. I was like, I'm just going to decrease my movement to 5 days a week instead of 7. I'm just going to be mindful of my portions. And within 3 months of just toning things down a little bit, I gained back every pound I lost plus more. I felt defeated. I was very depressed. I was very down on myself, and I was very confused. And I stumbled upon the book Health at Every Size, and that changed everything.
Can I just say something? I want people to connect with this because I know a lot of people have had this experience before. You were exercising 5 days a week, and probably being more mindful than you're mentioning about the foods that you're eating.
Definitely,
right?
yeah.
And you were probably stealing misery, maybe not as much as in contrast to every single day in these tiny little portions and stuff. But I think people have this notion that like if you do more, if you eat less, like you'll eventually get there. And that's not always the case.
No.
And along the way, you might really harm your body and your mindset as well.
You not
Absolutely.
might.
You
You
will.
will.
I was trying to be generous there.
Yeah.
Allow for a small percentage of
Let's
people.
just state the facts.
Yeah, and that's what I was doing. I was harming
Yeah.
myself. I was so sad. I was so down on myself, and my brain space was filled with, what am I going to eat? How am I going to go to this event and not overeat? Because it was constant. It was constant binging because of the constant restriction. So all my mind could focus on was like what my body looked like. We talked about this on another episode. I would walk into a room and check out everybody else and see how my body compared size-wise. It was exhausting. It was an exhausting way to live. But when I started to dig into the literature around the anti-diet movement, around health at every size, I joined the Association for Size Diversity and Health, and I started finding more support and more resources. I started curating a social media feed that spoke to this idea that health and weight are not synonyms, and that you can improve your health if that is a goal of yours without necessarily changing your weight, and how harmful intentional weight loss is, and the potential for developing an eating disorder, which is why in my practice now I work with people in eating disorder recovery, because I have such compassion for that journey, because I understand how easily diet sends you that way. All of the habits that we tell someone who is in eating disorder recovery to refrain from are the habits that we encourage them to do when they're dieting. It's restriction. It's cutting out food groups. It's keeping food logs and being very meticulous. It's replacing ingredients and things. It's all of this obsessive thoughts around, what we're doing. It's calories, how many calories in versus calories out. Like those are disordered behaviors like in the making, or they actually are. And so I got the knowledge and the information so that I could change my belief system. And then once I did that, I was like, okay, everybody needs to know. So that's when it's like teaching and speaking and doing podcasts and posting more content. That's when my social media like presence really blew up, because I started to connect with the people that needed this message and this information, which is how I knew like, okay, I'm aligned. This is where I'm supposed to be going. This feels good on the inside. I don't feel icky because I'm trying to tell somebody how many calories to eat at lunch and what exercise to do to lift their butt. Like, it's just, it was so superficial, but I don't want to devalue like going through that process, because I needed it. Like I needed to experience those things to see like what the other side looks like.
Yeah.
So it's been really challenging making the transition, but it's been really rewarding at the same time.
Thanks for your honesty around that challenging part. I think it is
Yeah.
challenging. People need to know that it's not a journey. You're just going to start and be like, oh, look, I love everything about myself.
No.
It's a long journey. I have a follow-up question to this journey because, and this is, I know we're going to talk a lot more about the mindset and the mentality side of things on this podcast, but, as a physical therapist and someone who started this exercise regimen with intention to lose weight, like how did you change your perspective on movement, on exercise from like, I'm supposed to do this much cardio and this many weights and stuff to like, hey, I'm going to go like maintain strength and flexibility and balance and coordination just so I can like do things that I want in my life and feel good?
That is such a good question. I'm glad you asked. And so here is the kind of scary reality to that. In order to shift my mentality, I had to blow everything up. So I actually took a long break from exercise, traditional exercise, and structured movement, outside of like the daily requirements of moving around, the house and work and whatnot. It was so hard for me to separate diet culture from movement. Even when I would find things that I enjoyed and really liked, it would be so easy for that to turn into like, oh, but did you do it today? Are you tracking? How long did you go? Did you know how many calories you burned? Oh, you forgot to do it yesterday. And there was so much judgment, and there's such a internal narrative that was just breaking me down to where I had to take multiple breaks from movement in order to rebuild sort of the building blocks and the foundation for why I was moving.
Yeah.
Because really, when I evaluated it, I had never moved like or participated in structured exercise for any reason outside of changing my body.
Right. It's like it's punishment for your own self-hatred, right?
It
I
has
will punish myself until something changes.
Yeah, it's always been punishment. So, I mean, some of that, I feel like people could go to therapy for this, because some of that was like uncoupling those two things, uncoupling changing my body from movement, because movement is so important. It is so vital to enjoying your life and having a good quality of life. But also, when your introduction to it is so rooted in diet culture, I told you how I grew up, it's so hard to separate them and so hard to find them. So I had to be compassionate with myself and give myself time. I had to be patient. And it's really hard to have an identity around being this fitness pro, this person people look up to, this exercise specialist, and then go to not moving and exercising. And then, if I'm being very honest, watching my body change as a result of that. Because people don't, going intuitive eating, anti-diet is wonderful. And it does feel good internally, the changes that happen. But the reality is 99.9% of the people who make that transition are going to gain weight. And that is scary, because I had built my identity around not gaining weight, not looking a certain way, not being chubby, not being fat, not looking like someone who had multiple children. And my body changed. I stopped moving as much. My body changed. I gave myself permission to eat. I stopped restricting what I was eating. My body changed. COVID happened. My body changed. So, and that's an ongoing thing, right? Our bodies continue to change, and we have to still figure out how to be kind and accepting and loving to ourselves.
We can't do that at all, right? We all want to stay young forever. We all
stay
wanna
young,
be
stay
this
thin,
forever, like all this stuff.
And it's so unrealistic and so unhealthy. But it's been a process, and yes, it's been very hard. And because parts of the journey, things come up again and again and again, so I have to keep tackling them. But at the end of the day, I've changed my belief system. So I no longer believe that health and weight are the same. And so even when I have a fleeting moment of like, oh, but if I just lost a little weight or looked a little different, I can come back to what I know to be true, what I know to be true about diets and intentional weight loss, what I know to be true about the development of an eating disorder, what I know to be true about myself and like what makes me happy and really, fulfills me. And then I can, get back to myself and, stay away from the diets
Yeah.
and all that stuff. But
Well, I think so many of our listeners are going to be able to connect with your story and the feeling of just, I don't know. I always think about the diets and, exercise for punish. I mean, we think that we're all striving for that liberation. But
Right.
when you really look at it, that is just the opposite
that's
of
a
liberation.
bondage.
Yeah.
Diets are bondage. Yeah.
So I'm really excited to have you along this journey interviewing incredible guests around just like figuring out what are some beliefs that we can put under the microscope and maybe get a little bit curious about and maybe get some shifts in, because it's like one at a time. We peel back the layers and then the beliefs about ourselves start to shift, and then our relationship to self shifts and then our relationship to other shifts, and it's really powerful. So I think it's a good time for me to introduce.
Can I actually make one quick comment before
Sure.
you introduce that? So I wanted to say this because I feel like it's really interesting to me. It's something I've observed over the last couple of years, which is the more someone has had a dedicated fitness routine, even if it was coming from like self-judgment and some sort of toxic relationship with self, the harder it is for them to embrace the notion that we can go move our bodies to feel better, right? And so when we talk to people who have fitness routines and things like that, it's the hardest for those people to typically make the transition to like, hey, I'm just going to try to be flexible and strong and have good coordination so I feel good. And what's been most surprising to me, and I think this is like a gem of hope for some people, is like the people who have injuries, who haven't exercised very much in their life, I think it becomes much easier for them to see the value of moving their bodies so they can feel better in their bodies, because they know what it feels like to feel bad in their bodies. And the worse we feel from injuries, from tightness, from weakness, whatever may be going through us, the more we can connect with that. Oh my God, I did these 3 stretches and like I immediately felt better. And that's the positive emotion that we want people to have, association with movement.
Yeah, absolutely.
But as we also hold the narrative that that you're still valuable and worth it regardless of what your body is capable of or the state that your body is in, right? That is the message that I hope to have people. It's great. You want to come to WeShape, we can give you movements that might help your shoulder pain. Or I'm not saying don't address that, but I'm saying that even with that shoulder pain, even with dysfunctional movement patterns, human beings are still valuable. And diet culture and toxic exercise culture take that human right away.
Yeah.
They rob it from us. So I hope that when people come to WeShape, they can, tap into some of these movements from an act of self-care and from connecting with themselves, and hopefully they can feel better. Physically, right? And then I hope that this podcast and some of our social content can also really tackle the mentality side of why we're here in the first place and unravel some of the threads that have woven us I have a visual of like a sweater that doesn't quite, it's itchy, it's uncomfortable, it's
more like a jail cell of
Yeah,
self-hatred,
yeah.
I know,
right?
it's like
A straight jacket.
Yeah.
There we go.
There we
can
go.
go there. Yeah.
So we're here to unravel all of that. And one of the things that we're going to ask every episode to our guests, and I'm hoping each of us can answer this as we close the episode today, is what's an old belief that you have shed that has impacted you in a big way? So I think Lisa should start this off.
Okay.
Yeah. What's a big belief that you have held that you've shed and it's impacted your life in a meaningful way?
So there's a lot, but I think one of the biggest beliefs that I had to shed was that my worth was going to be derived based on how many things I could do. So
Damn, you just stole mine.
Oh,
I'm just kidding.
you should have went first. Yeah, just this idea that, I'm not enough just in existing and being who I am, that I have to look a certain way, dress a certain way, do certain things, perform a certain way, be a high achiever. And it's never to take away from this idea that you can work hard, you can do great things, you can, have accolades and awards and achievements, but that does not denote your value. And for years, to me, they were one and the same, like this idea that what I'm doing is what's creating my value. But now I know that I'm valuable simply because I exist in this world. And I deserve respect and kindness and love and grace. And I'm going to give it to myself, and I'm going to require it of the people that I interact with. So that has been a game changer for me.
That's big.
That's a good one.
I'll go next because I don't want Katie to take another one from me. But like, I think I could piggyback on that and say I certainly felt the same way, that my value was related to what I was able to do in the world, like everything incorporated. But I feel like maybe something that might be more useful, just to kind of narrow it down a little bit, is to say like, I was able to connect with wanting to move my body, to feel good in my body from like a young age because of some injuries that I had sustained. But then my identity became what I'm able to do with my body is what my strength is. And then I got injured significantly worse. And then I had multiple surgeries and none of them worked. And then I went almost a decade with that joint just getting worse and worse. Finally got it fixed, and things are better now. But I still have these moments where I have to recognize that that's a crappy belief that's keeping me stuck, because I can't do the things that I once was able to do because of the injuries that I've sustained. And I think there's a lot of people out there who feel really miserable because they go, I should be able to do these things that I used to do. And sometimes it's hard to swallow that pill and say, like, that's just not going to happen anymore. I'm not going to be playing tennis, as hard as I can and expect it to like feel comfortable on my body anymore. And to let that go and just be like, you know what, I'm just going to be what I can be and let the other things go, is liberating, in the sense that I don't have any sort of identity tied to that anymore.
I like that. It's like self-acceptance. Just accepting where we are, and we're going to change, right? Like we want to live a long time. So there's going to be some things as we get older we just can't do the same as how we used to. And we need to make peace with that, for sure.
Yeah. Can you find value in yourself if you had no capabilities? I think that getting surgeries and laying in bed for a long time gives you that moment of like, am I only valuable because of what I can do? And then you go like, well, am I valuable if I just do nothing? And that's such a weird thing to grasp, but it's a good thing to practice and kind of contemplate.
Love it.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
I think mine is, I'm still working on shedding this, but this idea that I have to go down a path that was paved for me rather than the path that I choose. I have been very afraid of being a female and speaking up for fear of being too much for people, for fear of rocking the boat, right? And I think that this idea of, like, I'll give you a really good example in our business. A lot of people have said, and they don't even have to say anything. Like, I just look around and see how business operates, and I don't want to operate my business that way. And I want to go down a different path, and I feel the energy of like fear around that. Like, maybe you can't go that way because the other way is the best way if you want to be successful, but doesn't feel good for me. So just giving myself permission to go my own path regardless of what other people say, and just doing it my own way. And if I'm too much for you, then just turn the episode off.
Right? I'm not for you, and that's okay. Everyone
And that's
is not
totally
for us.
okay. Yeah.
I like it.
So
Sounds like you're giving yourself permission to be your most authentic self.
Which is
Is that
beautiful.
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
And everybody deserves that.
Yeah. It's hard to do.
So, well, I'm excited to ask that question to all the guests that we have booked this coming episode. So stay tuned, because I think we're going to get some good answers. And welcome to the We Shape family and the Feeling Lighter podcast, Lisa. We couldn't be more honored and just so grateful to have you here with us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm super excited about this.
We'll see everyone next week.